Welcome to ETM 260 Computer Aided Design. This is Lecture 7, Advanced Modeling Tools, Part 2. This lecture will introduce the second part of the advanced techniques to create more complex objects. Let's start with the pattern feature. This is very similar to the pattern curve tool that we learned previously. The difference, in this case, we could pattern different features such as revolutions, extrusions, holes, and many others. Let's now learn how to create a linear pattern. Open Lecture 7, Part 1. We're going to pattern this cylinder in two directions linearly. Let's go to the pattern feature. Let's select the reference feature and let's specify the first vector. Now select this edge. Notice that the pattern is done in the opposite direction of the solid, so we're gonna revert the direction. We're gonna change the number of the count to be 6 and the distance to be 20. You could see the location where the pattern is going to be placed. To do second direction, simply click here, select the vector, and change the number. Let's see, 2 every 25. Always double check that the pattern is in top of the sketch. And then once you're happy with your selection, press OK. Notice that the pattern is properly provided. If you need to make changes onto this pattern, simply double click the pattern feature in the Part Navigator. It will bring you back to the menus and you could change your selection. For example, you could change this to be 5 every 22. And then you will regenerate according to your changes. There are a couple of ways that you could modify a pattern feature. To show them to you, double click on the pattern feature in the Part Navigator. The first thing that we are going to do is change the increment of the distance between the patterns. If you notice, the distance at this moment is constant. We're going to change it first to the first direction and click over here. Notice that the increment at this moment is 0 because it's constant. If we increase it, let's see, to 5, and then we say OK, and then we hit OK. Let's now see how it looks from the top view. If you notice, at the beginning, the distance is the initial value we have, and then increases by 5 from the previous value that it has. Notice that you can make this change to 1 or 2 directions at the same time. Let's now learn how to modify the size of the features. Double click on the pattern feature, go back to the isometric view so we can see what we're doing. Click again on pattern increment. Now we're going to modify the size. We're going to do it once again to direction 1, so we're going to select the size and click. Notice that the ending value is going to be 25, and notice that the start limit is 0. If we increase a value by 5, notice what it's going to do. It's going to start, since it started by 0, notice that it didn't add any height to the original pattern, and then it starts increasing the value that you chose as it moves down into the pattern. Once again, you could do this process in one direction or in both directions at the same time. The quantities that you change by do not have to be the same in both of the directions. Let's now learn how to make a circular pattern. Open Lecture 7, Part 2. This moment we would like to have extrusion 5 to be the one pattern about the axis Z. So we're gonna go to pattern feature and we're gonna select the feature. If you cannot select it directly from the object, go to the Part Navigator and select the part. Once you are done with the selection, go to the vector, select the axis, and select a point where the axis is going to start. Notice that it shows the instances where the pattern is going to be located. You have the same choices as before for count and pitch, count and span, pitch and span. Let's see, we change it to 15, and it goes throughout the whole circle. Once you are done with your sections, click OK. Notice that in this moment, the extrusion revolves along with the pattern. If you want the extrusion to remain constant in its orientation, you do it this way. Go back to the pattern feature, go to orientation, and notice that over here you have the choices of follow the pattern or same as the input. Once you are done with your selection, press OK. Notice that in this case, the feature remains exactly in the same orientation as the original. If you want to create multiple patterns which are concentric to the same axis, you do it in the following way. Go back to the pattern and then create concentric members. Notice that it gives you how many you want, the direction that you want them, and the distance between them. See, we want 2. However, the distance that we wanted it to be actually going inwards. So we're going to have a negative vector. So let's make it negative 25. Let's see. Notice that it shows us. Let's make it a little bit bigger. So we actually have a little bit more of distance, 35. If we're happy with the selection, then press OK. Okay. Notice once again that I had already selected it in the same orientation. However, if you want to rotate about with the pattern, you could go back and change that option. Let's now learn about polygon patterns. To do that, let's deactivate this circular pattern. We're gonna go to pattern features. We're gonna select the feature from the part navigator. We're gonna select polygon. You want to specify a vector and a point. And notice now that the polygon is created. You select how many sides you wanted it to be. So let's see, you want 3 sides, and you indicate how many quantities or how many items you want per side. So let's choose 5, and then you indicate whether or not you want to go through the whole circle or only a section of it. Once you're happy with your selection, then press OK. Let's now learn how to make a spiral pattern. Open lecture 7, part 3, and then go to the pattern feature. Select the feature, either from the solid or from the part navigator. Specify the plane that is normal, so let's select the upper surface. And then describe the size of the spiral. This indicates what is the rotation, whether you want it left hand or right hand, the number of turns, the radial pitch, and the pitch along the spiral, meaning what is the distance between each one of the patterns. We have to select the reference vector. So let's select this one. And you can modify the sizes as you want them to be. Let's see, if you want more space between the patterns, you increase the value. If you want a bigger radius, you change it like this. That might be a little bit too big. Once we're happy with the selection, then we press OK. Let's now learn how to pattern along a curve. Let's open lecture 7, part 4. And the idea is that we're going to pattern this extrusion with its edge blend along this curve. Let's go to pattern features. We're going to select both of the features, the extrusion and the edge blend. We're going to select along, and we're going to select the path. Make sure that you do single curves. We're going to write how many we want and what is the space that we want to do. Notice that we're doing count and span. We want to do an span that is a little bit less than the 100% to account for the position of the feature that we want to pattern. Once you're happy with your selection, then you could press OK. We're going to learn now how to mirror a feature. It is very similar as mirroring a curve. The only difference is that we do not use an axis, but we use a plane. Let's start by opening Lecture 7, Part 5. Now we're going to mirror this feature about this plane. The mirror icon is usually under More, Mirror Feature. We're going to select the feature. I'm going to select it from the Part Navigator, and then we're going to select the plane. What we want to do now is do the same process, but we're going to mirror the whole part, and we're going to mirror it about the back plane. So we go More, Mirror Features. We're going to do Extrusion, the original extrusion, and the mirror component. For the plane, we're going to select the back plane. And then once you're done with your selection, press OK. Now notice that all the quantities were properly mirrored. Let's now learn how to sweep along a guide. In order to do that, let's open Lecture 7, Part 6. A sweep along the guide simply takes one sketch and sweeps it and creates a solid as it moves through the second sketch. In order to create it, we always going to need two sketches which have to be perpendicular to each other. The first one is created between the X and Y plane, and the second one is created in the XZ plane. Let's now go into More and sweep along the guide. The first selection is the cross-sectional area that you're gonna sweep, and then the second selection is that the path that section is going to take. Notice the new solid that is created. You could add the same Boolean steps or the Boolean choices as we had previously. In many cases, the cross-sectional area that is being swept is a circle. You could have the choice of having the cross-sectional area to be a circle, or you could use Create a Tube as a new tool. In order to show you, let me deactivate the sweep. Let's go into More, and let's go into Tube. In this case, you only need to select the path because it already knows that the cross-sectional area is going to be a circle. You only need to show the outer diameter, so let's see 5, and if you want it to be a solid, the inner diameter will be 0. However, if you wanted to have a thickness, you simply define both the outer and the inner diameter. The next technique that we're going to learn how to do are threads. In order to do that, let's go to Lecture 7, Part 7. We would like to create a thread for this screw. We're going to go under More and select Thread. We're going to create a detail thread for this screw. We need to select the surface, and by default it will provide a starting point for the thread. If this is not the starting point that you will want, simply go to Select the Start and select the point by which you want to start the thread. NX takes the dimension of the cylinder and creates default values that are the closest to the standard values for a thread corresponding to that cylinder size. If you need to modify them, simply do so by writing the new numbers. Once you're happy with your selection, press OK. Please keep in mind that the thread feature requires a lot of memory. If you make the thread very fine, it will take a longer time to load. Also note that you could follow the same process to create an internal thread, for example, for a nut. The next technique that we will learn is how to create a shell. To do so, open Lecture 7, Part 8. What we want to do is convert this solid into a shell-like feature. To do that, go to the shell icon and notice that you're going to have two different choices. One in which you remove one or more surfaces while creating the shell, or the second one where all the surfaces are maintained and you take the inner material away from the solid. Let's start with the first choice. You select the surface that you would like to remove. So we could do this one. And we could also do the back surface. And notice that we could change the thickness to what your requirements might be. Once you are done with your selection, then you click OK. Let's make some modifications to the shell. Double click on it, and let's, for example, change the direction of the shell. Notice that what it does, it creates the shell going in the opposite direction of the sketch. If you want not to remove these surfaces, simply double click and make it shell all the surfaces. So at this moment, when you click OK, you basically do not see a difference. If you go to the wireframe, you're gonna notice that basically your item is shallow and all the material from the inside has been removed. This is the end of Lecture 7, Advanced Modeling Tools, Part 2. Make sure to complete all the required quizzes, review the material given in the PowerPoint and in Chapter 7 from your textbook, and be ready to start class assignments.